Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and you all know two things about me. I absolutely love talking about marketing, but even more than that, I love mindset. And this fits in so well with today's guest. I've already talked to her off air, and she is going to bring some incredible knowledge nuggets to all of us here today. I'm personally very excited for this conversation today because I am joined by the incredible Kathy Sebuck. Let me tell you just a little bit about Kathy. She's a strategic thinker, entrepreneurial leader, athlete, and author with over 25 years of IT sales and marketing leadership expertise, working for tech startups, Fortune 500 enterprise software companies in the public, the private sector. She's got so much experience and also a really unique approach to marketing. And she exhibits all of that through her consulting company, Marchitecture, which is focused on helping founders, startups, and small businesses create and market their story, influence buying behavior, and drive business growth. All of this, so much of her work is based on her new book, Waves of Change, where she created an interactive learning platform called the Connected Balance Experience, which focuses on helping entrepreneurs build more effective decision-making skills using growth mindset tools. All of this stuff is so interconnected, and I can't wait to explore all of it with my guest today. So let's dive into my interview with Kathy Sebuck. All right, Kathy, there's so much more I could say about you, but before I do that, welcome to the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Brian, thanks so much for having me and that gracious welcome.
Heck yeah. So obviously that only does you a little bit of justice with all the awesome work that you're doing in the world and obviously your awesome story up to this point. So fill in the gaps for listeners beyond the bio. Who is Kathy?
Who is Kathy? You know, it depends on the day, sort of. Kathy knows who Kathy is. So Kathy spent most of her life trying to be connected to herself. And so after 25 years in corporate tech and realizing that I wanted to do bigger things and help people, I decided to leave in 2019 and start my own consulting company, which I had been doing side hustle work for years, but really kind of wanted to take the dive. And have really enjoyed the work over the last several years, helping startups tell their story, helping them understand what marketing communications fundamentals are, how they work together. It's not just about social media, and really bringing out the essence of what people do and why they do it. I'm a huge, huge fan of Simon Sinek's work. And if you haven't read his book, Find Your Why, you really should, because it really helps you get grounded in your own truth, why you do what you do. And then, of course, your passion can come through, can come through in whatever you're doing that really feels truly aligned to who you are and what you want to be.
Yeah, just like you, I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek's work. And obviously it shows actually in your work as well, now that we're using him as the example, because you do combine the mindset elements with the marketing, with the business growth. And we're going to dive so much into that strategic thinking, that business tactical knowledge that you have. But I've got to ask you this up front, Kathy. It's been a crazy busy, transformational few years for you since you left the corporate world, started your own business, published your book. What were those pushing? Maybe something pushed you, maybe something pulled you. What got you to where you are to take that plunge in your entrepreneurial journey and now as a published author?
I think most people really have the creative spark. It's just really whether or not they're going to let it out or whether they're going to listen to it. I've always been kind of a left brain, right brain person. And so the pandemic really was an interesting time that allowed me the pause to really stop and go, what is it that I really want to do right now? Because I have the space to do it. And as things were quiet and shut down and a little crazy, I'm one of those people that I thrive in chaos. That's what I've learned in tech. And so as a result of that, I decided to pack up, sell my house, move across country. And while I was getting resettled in San Diego, when I had moved from the East Coast, I just had a lot of time to think and just kind of regroup and get really focused on what was important to me and really kind of get reconnected to myself, which is kind of where this whole idea came from about connected balance, which generated all kinds of new opportunities and work around, just being in a different mindset, more of a growth mindset, which wasn't new to me, but it was time to actually walk my talk and gave me the space to do it. So I'm really, really thankful. Not that the pandemic wasn't horrific. I mean, I'm obviously directly affected. My father unfortunately died from COVID, but it really did pause life, good and bad, and really allowed you to take stock, allowed you to kind of reflect, and then really get clear on what was important for you.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And obviously, sometimes it does come through those unfortunate things like the sad passing of your dad throughout it. But it's something that I've said so many times in the podcast before, which is seasons of change bring fresh reflections, bring fresh perspectives as well, things that maybe we couldn't see before. And it's certainly blossomed in so many different ways for you in a professional sense. I'd love to know about the name of your company, Marchitecture. Obviously, I see the word architecture inside of it, but I want to know more of what drove your decision to pick that name.
Well, I'm a builder. I started my career in startups back before there wasn't email. Yeah, I'm dating myself. And so I've always been one of those creative builders where I'm an out-of-the-box thinker. I'm a creative problem solver, where I'm the one that's usually looking way on the left or right that says, have we thought about this? And so when you think about software or tech solutions, they're architected, and we have architects in that space that are building solutions or, whatever they're building. And so you look at how marketing also has its own architecture. And most people aren't exposed to the full architecture. They see pieces and parts. You see a story, or you see, social media, or you see a brand, but there's multiple components to the fundamentals of marketing communications and digital marketing. And so as a result, you become an architect and you architect various solutions to meet your business goals. So it only seemed fitting to kind of bring the architecture into the marketing side of things. I was sitting in MarTech for years, and so Marchitecture just kind of hatched. And while it was kind of odd, it really stuck because it speaks to both sides of the business of where I was and actually what I do. Interestingly enough, there was a Marchitecture LLC that wasn't a building architecture company, but different space and not a conflict. So I thought, you know what, let's just roll with it. So here I am.
Yeah, I love that perspective, particularly because as I was doing my research ahead of today's conversation, you and I exchanged a few emails leading up to this. And I said, I don't know where our conversation is going to go because I want to touch base with you on this. I want to talk about this. And it really is all these seemingly from the outside unconnected pieces. But hearing the architectural analogy, you're right. All of these things come together to build something solid, which is a business that impacts people. And so I want to go more into that because obviously your connected balance experience is so deeply integrated in what you do, and it's part of what makes you so unique. As I was doing so much research on you, I want to hear more about what that is.
So think about the heart-mind-body connection. You have the yogis, you have the quantum physics people, you have so many different schools of thought about what that means to each person as they approach it. But the truth is, if you look at not only the science, but the spirituality behind it, when your heart, mind, and body are connected with the research behind it, as well as the spirituality, you operate on all cylinders and you're dead on about who you are and what you want to do. I think the challenge is life shows up and things get complicated and your emotions get involved. And then we get either knocked off balance or we get caught up in what's happening. And as a result of that, it clouds our judgment. It's not a problem, it's a fact. And so then the question becomes, what kind of tools do you really have to keep you grounded? Are you connected? Do you have connected balance? And so looking at those different components, the mind, body, and all the pieces together, are you really dialed in to make the best decisions you can? And so there's all kinds of research and big thinkers and books and things out there that I've read over the last decade that I just found were really kind of mind-bending in terms of, if you take it all in, it's pretty overwhelming. But if you boil it all down, which is what I tried to do in my book, to say, These are some of the standard concepts, and these are some of the big thinkers and the tools that come with those concepts. And these are things that can help you make better decisions. And so as a result, the program that I built online is really boiling down those 4 key areas to say, this is a drive-by to understand at a high level what these concepts are, who these people are. They're amazing books because most of them are New York Times bestsellers, and really just talk about some of the information that's out there, but giving you kind of the cheat sheet to say, here's the fast track, take it all in, and then use what resonates for you. Because we all know that not everything lands with everyone, and not everybody is connected or resonates with the same information. But on the whole, everyone pretty much knows that being connected to themselves is important, and that usually affects your decision making as well as your environment or your emotions. And so why not have a better tool set that when you're in those situations and stress shows up, or even when things are great, how do you capitalize on that? How do you step away from the fear and the unknown and actually look at that, change your mindset into, this is a growth opportunity for me to do something great. I think the biggest example of that is my pandemic journey. Not that I'm special or look at me, I did what I did, but it was a scary time. And instead of sitting home and worrying about, if I was going to die, which let's be honest, there was a hint of that, I'm not that person. And I thought, this is a huge opportunity for me to grow. While it's an odd time and a very strange way, it's no surprise I'm one of those experiential learners where if I'm going out, I'm going to go out on a high note doing something I want to do. So I think it's really about a growth mindset. I've always been a curious learner. And if you can look at life with a lens of opportunity and positivity versus the negative bias we're built with, that's always even there as far as, our doubts and, the way we look at things. It's our immediate hardwiring that says, that's a fear, it's a fight or flight thing, versus taking the initiative to say, what, brain, I'm okay. And I'm actually going to look at this from my heart instead, because the heart actually is, I know it's hard to believe, but there's research out there that the heart is actually 5,000 times greater than the brain as far as the electromagnetic waves. And so when the two of them are connected, you're only that much better. And so better to be connected, heart and brain, and actually move into the direction that you want to move and actually be conscious to make those decisions to get you there.
Woo, so much that I want to unpack from all of that, Kathy. But I'm going to remind Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur listeners, because I sent an email it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, towards, the beginning of Q2 2020. And I emailed our Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur community of entrepreneurs all over the world. And I reminded them that it's these times of change where huge opportunities lie. And I pointed at the example of the 1930s, the Great Recession, or the Great Depression, not the Great Recession, which we've all experienced now, but the Great Depression created the next wave of innovators, the next wave of entrepreneurial leaders and millionaires. There were opportunities. And Kathy, for both you and I, we can both point to tangible big shifts forward that we personally made during the pandemic. So we found those opportunities, but I think so much of it comes down to the fact that you're right. You have that growth mindset. You see opportunities, you see areas for growth, which don't naturally come for every entrepreneur. Talk to us about some of those differences, because you've worked across a wide spectrum of businesses. What's the opposite to this? And then talk to us about how the growth mindset is the antidote to those common problems you've seen.
Well, based on any industry you're in, there's always challenges, there's always stress, there's always problems to solve, there's always bad people. And so the only thing, and this isn't new, like my information's not earth shattering. I think it's just a more common sense approach that you can only control yourself and how you think. You can never control your environment. You can't control the people in it, or you can't control the situation or the circumstances. So the better thing to do is look at where you fit into the puzzle, what you can do about it in terms of either help yourself or step away, and make a clear decision about how do you want to interact in this certain space. And if you need to remove yourself, great. And if you want to engage in it, great. But make that conscious decision so you are driving your business, you and your business, not your business is driving you or people are driving you. And that's easy to say. Trust me, I've had a lot of challenging situations in my life. And, I think it's easier to say than do. And it's really hard to not, know exactly what an outcome is going to be, but you also have to trust. And you know what? I really think, especially in today's world, when we're watching what's happening on the political stage, as well as the global stage with all the, crisis and global warming and all the things that are going on, you have a fundamental choice to decide. Do I want to focus on all the bad things that I see every day on the news? Or do I want to look at the good side of the rose-colored glasses, which people could say, oh, rose-colored glasses, it's a better way to live. So if you want to capitalize on all the good things, that creates more good things. The science behind that of the law of attraction or any of that work as far as quantum physics is concerned will tell you get out what you put back. And so if you approach things with a positive mindset and a growth mindset, you absolutely get that back. Versus if you show up with negativity and, struggle and concern, then you're just going to feel uneasy. And so why not choose the path of least resistance and actually feel better about where you are in your decisions, because you have control of your mind. Now, I know that's easier said than done. It takes a lot of work. And we all have programmed patterns and belief systems, but those are in your own head for you to manage. And so there's plenty of books, people, resources out there to help you kind of rewire, if you will, how you want to think, or just kind of say, you know what, I'm not going to take that approach. I'm going to dive in and I'm going to try something different. That's kind of how I look at things and say, normally I would do this, but I'm going to try something new and see what happens because I'm a curious learner. I also know that I have tools, and whatever shows up, I'm going to be able to work through that because I've just had the experience time and time again to say, I have tools and I'll work through it. So part of it is, confidence in yourself, trusting in yourself, and actually using your support system and your tools around you to make the best decisions you can. And you know what? Here's the thing, and Brian, I'm sure you can appreciate this too. Entrepreneurialism can be kind of lonely. And you know what? You're running you with your great ideas and it's all good, but get a support network if you don't have one. Build one. Find other CEOs, find other like-minded business people. Build your infrastructure, architect your infrastructure so you can actually have the sounding boards and the support you need, because it's never easy, especially being a business owner. Life is difficult. Business can be a challenge. Things change all the time. There's one thing that you can count on. It's going to change. So make sure you have the right people around you that are going to support what you do and actually are similar minded so you can all move towards the common goal and be successful. Trying to think what that question was.
Yeah, no, it actually leads perfectly into where I want to go from here. But before we get there, I want to call out for listeners because I think it's such an important thing that is so evident, whatever it is that we're talking about, is you continue to bring up the word conscious. And you said it right there. It's a matter of us running our businesses rather than our businesses running us. And I can particularly think, especially in my early 20s when I just started my first few businesses, is that, a nasty email would land in my inbox from somebody who is offended about, being sold to or pitched to, or something happened. And I would let that ruin my day, Kathy. And in fact, there are times where I'd let it ruin my week. Yeah. And the worst part is I would take those scars into future sales pitches, future sales meetings. And you're right. It is that conscious. And one other thing that came to mind as you were sharing your insights with us is that quote. It's one of my favorite quotes in the world, which is, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And particularly when bad things happen, we don't need that to shape the lens or recolor the lens through which we see the world. And you're telling us, you're giving us permission here today, which I'm so excited about for listeners to say, no, I choose to see the world the way that I want to. I choose to see the world. I recently was introduced to this vocabulary word, Kathy, and I'm curious if you've ever come across it. It's the opposite of paranoia. Paranoia is where you think the world is against you. Pronoia is when you're convinced that the world is conspiring in your favor. And I've taken that aboard personally and professionally, and I've started to find that to be true. I'm just like, everything's working in my favor. Anything you want to add there?
Well, I haven't heard that word. Sounds like marketing, but it's a good one. I think that is the definition of positive mindset. And you can see there's a million books out there about growth mindset, positive mindset, and how you actually can, create your path. If I had $1 for every time I listened to somebody who told me no, which, it's hard at first because then there's all kinds of things that come with that no. But versus building on that no about how you're going to get to yes. I had an admissions dean tell me once I would never get a master's degree because I was not competent enough to actually, finish the program, which I kind of laugh now. That was, 20 years ago. But I think that when you really look at the mindset, that's really where the power is. And it's hard because, society has a narrative for us. Our parents have a narrative for us. Everybody's telling us what we should and shouldn't be doing. Politics are trying to dictate what our decisions are. And I think it's really about conscious awareness at this point. And it's not about the wokeness of it all. It's truly just being self-aware of who you are and where you are and what you need and what you want to do and the decisions that you want to make as far as moving towards those goals versus, being led or driven. And I think, I'm really thankful. I grew up in a house of sports, and I know you can appreciate this based on your soccer background, but my dad was a football coach for 56 years. And there were a couple things that came out of that. And the first being that hard work always pays off. And as you know, the more you get close to something that you're passionate about, usually it blows up and moves toward where you want to be because you're putting energy towards it versus an in and out or a spotty approach to things. And so that hard work as you're moving towards goals absolutely does pay off. I think the mindset is also, once again, huge. You look at professional athletes across the board and what do they tell you? They tell you about the visualization they do. They talk about the positive outcomes that they see. They talk about the approach to how they actually perform. And so all of those things really lend themselves to success. And there's so many books and stories. In fact, I just saw the Air Jordan movies coming out that just talks about how people's big ideas really become real. But you have to believe them. You have to believe in them. You have to believe in yourself. And you have to be willing to roll up your sleeves. Because as you know, being a business owner isn't a cakewalk. You can have a great idea that takes off for the first year. And the first year is amazing. But it's the second and third and fourth year that really become a challenge in terms of, are you aligned with your business? Do you know who your customer is? Are you marketing to the right audience? There's so many pieces of that architecture, if you will, and those dots absolutely need to be connected. And so getting clear with yourself, I'll steal Simon's communication from the inside out. I think architecture from the inside out. You have to start inside to know who you are and what you want and be connected to those thoughts, dreams, and visions, and then architect that solution or path. And whatever comes, look at that as opportunity to learn. I think failure, while it's a great teacher and it's painful, it definitely is a bridge to your next steps, and it helps you to continue to grow. And even if you arrive where you had hoped, it's probably not going to look the way you expected. And that's okay, because it really is about the journey. And I know that's old and cliche, but it's true. And maybe that's age from my perspective, but I learned more on the journey than actually achieving the goal.
Yes. And it reminds me, Kathy, I'm getting chills as we talk, just because it's so many concepts that you're right. As I've gotten older and more mature in my own entrepreneurial journey, having been in this for 15 years now, since I was 19, is that I'm realizing that all of these things ring true. And these are the real secrets. So many people want to talk about what color should my opt-in button be and all of that, but we're talking about the real stuff that makes the difference. And when you talk about the journey, one thing that comes to mind, I'm a sucker for quotes, clearly, is the man who enjoys walking will walk far further than the man who enjoys the destination. And it's absolutely true. So I love that concept. And you talked about architecture from the inside, and it leads me right into where I want to go next. Listeners know that part of what I love to ask guests is, what is your zone of genius? And Kathy, when we asked you what your zone of genius is, you said connecting with people to help them see, create, and market and sell their vision. That's something that comes from inside. And Kathy, knowing the entrepreneur to entrepreneur audience as well as I do, I know that so many of them, when they hear that advice from branding agencies, when they hear this advice from marketers of, share your story, share your vision with the world, they say, oh, I don't have a story. I don't have a vision. Talk to us about part of that process for you to uncover that and really get it out of them, because we know it lives there within them.
It does. It really does. And unfortunately, agencies are get paid by the hour. So I think that really to pull out your story, and I actually have this conversation with a lot of startups where they say, this is what I do. And this goes back to Simon Sinek's golden circle. Everybody has a what and a how, but not many people know their why. And so the more you dig into, there's a reason why you're launching what you're launching, whether it's a family connection, whether it's, you grew up in a place that you had something special that reminds you of that place. There's always something deeper that lies beneath why you're launching your business. And it could be as simple as I want to help others. And so I think the key is, and this goes back to connecting in, is you need to go for a walk. I love that quote. And really think about, why do I do what I do? What is driving me to sell whatever this product is? And I'll tell you, if money's the answer, you have a real problem, because when the money doesn't come and there's no passion behind what you do, you're really going to have a hard time getting through that bump in the road. And so really understanding deep down what is driving the behavior to want this business to succeed, even if it's as simple as helping others, at least when things get tough, you go, am I helping others? I am. Okay, then I can move through this. If I'm not helping others, you at least have a place to check your alignment. And I think this is the piece that's missing for most of us. I know it was for me. When you don't do a personal check-in on somewhat of a regular basis, let's say monthly, quarterly, whatever it needs to be, it's really easy to get swept up in life. Every day clicks off, months click off, years click off. And you're focused on where you think you're going, but you're not really aligned with what you're doing. And you're not in the right place or in the right job or with the right people. And it's just easier to keep going versus really looking at what's driving you, what's making you tick, what is really at the heart of the matter. And so that way, when you really dig down, and it takes a while, it takes some quiet thought, some walking. If you're a moving meditator like I am, you got to be moving, thinking, doing whatever you're doing to really get to the root of things and think about what is driving me. And then that story usually does come out. I find that when I really work with startups or, founders, and they say, well, I don't really have a story. And if you just kind of poke around for 5 or 10 minutes and start to ask some leading questions about, what you like, what you don't, the business you're in. And if you've chosen a path that is money driven, that is something you're not passionate about, it's going to become obvious very quickly, which is fine. But that's going to be hard to sustain long term. So you have a choice. I think at the end of the day, if there's one thing I've learned and try to tell everybody is you have a choice. You may not feel like you have a choice, but you have a choice based on where you are and what you're doing and how you want to operate, because that's what life provides you as choice. Now, what is going on in your head is a totally different conversation altogether, but life is full of choices and you actually have the opportunity to make them.
Yeah, I love that answer, Kathy, for a million reasons. And I want to call out to listeners who may have missed it, because it's not just what you're saying, but it's actually what you're doing here in front of all of us in real time as well. Is that when I think back to our conversation, we're less than a half an hour into knowing each other, but already I can see, you've mentioned, hey, I'm an athlete. You've already mentioned, hey, my dad was a football coach. You've talked about these things that really reveal who you are at your core. And that has now shaped not only who you've become, but it's shaped so much of how you operate and how you do business and how you view not only personal growth, but business growth. And it's so cool to see how you connect all these different dots. And it feels right now that this is a really good time. I'm also personally curious about your new book, Waves of Change. And I know, obviously, I've researched the book, and I know, one of the subheadlines that you have right there is, do you know what really makes you tick? Can you articulate your core values? Talk to us about Waves of Change and what really sparked you to sit down and write it, and what the big takeaways that you think everybody needs from it are.
It's really about people. I think that's the biggest thing we've lost sight of today in life is, people matter. It doesn't matter where you come from or who you are or what color you are or what culture you are, people matter. And so connected balance, and the purpose of the book is for people to really get connected into themselves and to others. And I think the network of opportunity out there is really about collaboration. And I think that that probably comes from my sports background when you look at team dynamics and how, the sum of the parts is always better than, going at it alone. And not that, I was a track athlete originally, so I did a lot of solo sports in addition to the group sports that I played. But when you really look at the big thinkers and you look at things that get done that are a big deal, it's always a group of people, or it's always a team of folks, or it's always, look at space. When you think about amazing things that people do, they don't usually do them by themselves. Plus, we're not wired to really be disconnected. That's another story that doesn't really resonate. So I think the intent of the book was really to pull in all these great pieces of information across history, across, time and business, and really talking about how when you really can be successful, it takes a village. And so when you really look at respecting and connecting with people as humans, and, I know our political climate right now is not supporting that kind of story, but when you really look at true success, it's usually a group effort. And so the book calls out the people, the tools, the history, and really gives you some not only things to think about, but action steps. There's a whole, in the back, there's a whole reading list of great books and recommendations that I've read every one of them, and I've walked away with a nugget from each of them. And so I really just wanted to create kind of a resource guide that has a hint of humor as well as stories, but really provides a combination of real applicable tools, business learnings, and just things to think about. My whole goal was kind of a Scooby moment. If anyone, I know this is a little dated, but it's kind of that, It's like I want people to actually walk away and think about what's important to them and connect to themselves and others, because I think that's really how we're going to create better shift, and we're going to see better things happen, not only locally, but globally, when we're all connected together.
Yeah, I love that answer. And obviously, it's such a big reason as to why I love and respect the work that you're doing out in the world, is because you're right. So much of it is rooted in doing what's real to you. And as someone who just, everybody who listens to this podcast, everybody who knows me in real life knows how excitable I am about all these different things. And it's something I can't hide from my work. I can't put on a corporate-y face, and I can't, use specific language. I'm always just me. And I know that that's what deeply resonates with listeners. But Kathy, I'm going to ask you this. I've actually never talked about this on the air, and it's fun to talk with you because I know you have such a shared vision about this, is that here we are talking today about doing marketing and doing business in a way that is true to us. Whereas a lot of advice we hear, and it's more tactical advice, and I agree with a lot of it within the context of think about your customer. But you and I, what we're talking about today is first think about you. And it almost sounds selfish to newer entrepreneurs. I think that you and I have been in the game for so long that we're so confident about stepping into us first. Talk to us about that delicate balance between, and I don't even think they're opposing forces, but I'd love for you to share insights into how do you balance the two of thinking about you from an entrepreneurial perspective, a little bit of that selfishness that we all need, but then how much more deeply we can resonate with our customers.
Yeah, it's always customer first. And there's a whole, focus now on customer experience, which is critical, because how many times I can't tell you, I've seen somebody create a product and try to go sell it, and they haven't done their customer research. Nobody needs what they sold or want to sell, and it doesn't solve a problem. So of course it's not really going to land in the market. But I think starting with yourself, it's not a selfish approach. It's more of an alignment approach. Think of it in this lens. If you show up to your business and you're not aligned with who you are and what you want to do, it's really going to be hard for you to run your business. And if you're not powered by the passion or clear on what your goals and objectives are, it's going to be hard for you to focus on your customer. So I'm not saying that you put yourself in front of or before your customer. What I'm saying is you need to get right with yourself first, anchor down on some clarity as far as what's important, and then bring all that to your business, which then can focus 100% on your customer. Because we all know when you're fragmented or stressed out or you're having a tough day, when you bring that to work or home, it's a real challenge to get things done, to connect with people, to communicate effectively, to even be heard, because it's usually a lot of noise in there because your brain's going blah, 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 and you're not really articulating or connecting. And so when you're grounded, you can be grounded in your business and you can be focused on your customer. And I do agree with you. They're interconnected and they're synonymous, but you really can't do the second without the first. And it's just like anything. If you're not prepared or you don't prep for wherever you're going or what you're doing, then you're going to probably end up not where you want to be. So I think it's easy to say, sitting where I am now, my roadmap was never clear, but at the same time, I was always relatively open and clear about where I was going and what I wanted to do. How I got there was up to the universe about what was going to show up and what opportunities and people, came on my path. So I think, it goes back to visioning and really looking at, what is it that you want to do, that you're passionate about, or that what is driving you. And then that clarity the rest will fall in line. But without that first step, which is sometimes fearful, it's kind of take that step into the unknown because it's not easy, but you at least have to have that guidepost to start. And then once you have that nailed down, then absolutely you can focus 150% on your customer, which is absolutely what's going to drive your business.
Yeah, I love that perspective for so many reasons, Kathy. And I think part of it is I'm a very visual person. So as people tell me things, teach me things, share their perspectives, I picture so much of it. And what I pictured as you were saying that is I went straight to healthy body. And I'm just like, yeah, think about how different life is when something's wrong. So like as a avid tennis player these days, sometimes my knee flames up, my right knee from playing soccer for so long, it tends to act up. And I feel the difference in the way I do everything. When I go to the grocery store, I feel the difference in how I interact with the cashier when I'm injured versus when I'm great, when I'm healthy, happy, doing well. It transcends into everything in my life. And so I really love your perspective on that. And I particularly enjoy how you took kind of the word that I use is a little bit of selfishness as the ingredient there. And you said it's actually not selfish at all. It's becoming aligned. And when all of these things are aligned, that's when you perform at your best business wise. So I love that. Obviously, there's so many golden nuggets of knowledge in what you've shared with us today. And for sure in your book, Kathy, I'm going to pick up a copy of your book because I could listen to you talk about these things all day long. And I love that you've shared this with our listeners. But before I let you go, and before we open the stage to tell listeners where they should go from here, so much of your approach is rooted in that internal self-discovery and so much in the mindset work and so much in, I love that the fact that you bring up consciousness, like making conscious decisions so frequently. So with all of the things that we've talked about here today, wrap it up for listeners. Share with them something that you feel very strongly that they should sit down and do from here to get better personally, professionally, in their business, in their marketing, and in their sales.
I would say really it's about the personal inventory. And really just sitting down, and it doesn't have to be a high-end exercise with a plan and in a document, but really get right with yourself on a walk. Like you said, I love that quote. Or, sit down and have a conscious moment where you say, am I where I want to be? Is this who I want to be? Is this what I want to be doing? And really looking at, are you connected in? Or are you really living a pattern of someone else's choosing? Or being dictated to by a job, by a relationship, or a situation, a circumstance, whatever that is, because you do have choice. And I think that in the big scheme of things, we're all here to learn. And I think the hardest thing I've had to pick up, and you mentioned it about your knee, is we've all had injuries and health issues and problems and crisis in our life. And it's really what you do during that crisis that helps you realize that you do have skills and that you can rise above whatever happens. Because life isn't perfect and there's always going to be challenge. And so the trick is, how do you navigate those changes? How can you be the observer of what's happening instead of directly being personally affected? And that's very difficult, but that's what helps to keep you grounded. And not to say to ignore your feelings and stuff them, but that's the conscious approach to say, okay, what's happening now? What do I feel like? And how can I regroup with the tools that I have? And if you don't have some tools, get them. There's no shame in getting tools, whether it's counseling or reading or self-help books or whatever. There's a lot of resources out there, instead of just kind of stepping back and saying, this is my lot, or this is just my life. This is just how it is. It isn't. There's plenty of information out there that tells you that you can architect your dream, your life. It's just whether or not you want to roll up your sleeves, because it's not always an easy journey. But you know what, Brian, I wouldn't trade it. I've had my own ups and downs and roller coasters, but I can at least say I'm where I want to be and I'm doing the work I want to do. And the marketing that comes from that, in terms of being able to help others learn from either my mistakes or share some of the tools and things that I have, is my really kind of my legacy. The book was really about just sharing tools and wisdom along the way, because I was very fortunate to have several mentors along my path. And so now I think it's just as important to help the next generation of entrepreneurs.
Heck yes. I love so much stuff behind that answer and everything you've shared with us here today, Kathy. And I'll tell you what, as someone who gets to talk to a lot of marketers, a lot of entrepreneurs in my line of work, I can very safely say that your approach is super unique. Obviously, you know that. But as an outsider, I'll also tell you, it feels like such a better way to do it. And I think the big thing that listeners will walk away from today's episode with is it'll be a weight off their shoulders. For me, listening to you say this, I'm excited. So every week I do a coffee date with myself where I take inventory. I love that you use that term as well. And so much of what I'm looking forward to this weekend is to sit down and ask myself these big questions that you talked about with regards to alignment, because that takes so much weight off of having the perfect opt-in page, having the perfect branding, color palette, all of these things. It's all just about that alignment that you shared so much with us here today. So I really appreciate that. On that note, Kathy, I'd love for you to share with listeners where the heck they can and should go to learn more about your business, more about your book, Waves of Change. Share that with them and where they should go from here.
Absolutely. Well, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you about brand colors, social media channels, or anything else to market your business. However, I will challenge you on all of those to say there's something deeper under the surface to help you do what you do. You can find me at marchitecturemarketing.com. That's my website. Waves of Change is on Amazon, and I'm on LinkedIn if you want to reach out and have any questions. I'm always open to help and to try to connect people to other resources or point them in the direction that might be helpful to them. And I just hope everyone can really get right with themselves and get connected and hopefully be on the path that you want to be on. And I trust when you do, your success will be that much sweeter.
Yes, listeners, I'm in the same bucket as every single one of you after today's episode. We've all got homework to do with ourselves. Kathy, you have been such a wealth of information. I'm going to share that link one more time with listeners. It's marchitecturemarketing.com. It's architecture with an M on the front of it, marchitecturemarketing.com. But listeners, wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode, of course, check the show notes, look below this episode, and you'll find a link to Kathy's website, marchitecturemarketing.com, as well as her book, Waves of Change, which you can also just go straight to Amazon and type in Waves of Change. You'll see Kathy Sebuck as the author. So Kathy, thank you so much for joining us today on the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Thanks so much, Brian. It's been a pleasure. And if there's anything I can do for you or the community, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much.